Welcome all hunters, anglers, trappers, and shooters to the only fish and wildlife conservation podcast that goes behind the scenes of the business of conservation, the Connecting with Conservation podcast. Our podcast is hosted by John Gassett from the Wildlife Management Institute and Jim Cucaruto of the Outdoor Stewards of Conservation Foundation. John and Jim will talk with experts from all sectors of the conservation arena about their passion for conserving the great outdoors. So please welcome our hosts of the Connecting with Conservation podcast, John and Jim.
Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Connecting with Conservation, the only podcast that goes behind the scenes to look at the business of conservation in our country. I'm John Gassett with the Wildlife Management Institute, and I'm your co-host for Connecting with Conservation. Here with my fellow co-host, Jim Cucaruto from Outdoor Stewards of Conservation. How are you doing today, Jim?
Doing great, thank you. And I was trying to think a little bit about what you can't do in our guest state, and I couldn't think of anything you can't do up there.
So there isn't anything.
That's right. Maine's got it all, and we're excited to have Judy Camuso, who's running a lot of things up there in Maine. She got a long title that I'm going to let her, tell us about, so I don't butcher it. But welcome, Judy. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the position, and then we'll get into all the things you can do in Maine.
Great. Thanks so much, and thanks for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be here with you both. My name is Judy Camuso. I am the Commissioner of the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. So we oversee all the state's inland fisheries and wildlife. We have a sister agency that oversees the coastal program in the state, but we handle all the inland fish and wildlife statewide. And as you mentioned, Jim, there's ample opportunity for sportsmen and women and people who love the outdoors right here in Maine, from ocean, lakes, rivers, mountains, beaches, you name it. Get a lot of big game species, a lot of non-game species. Whatever your interest is, we can offer it here in Maine.
Yeah, we focus on talking a lot about hunting, fishing, trapping, and shooting. Got all those covered. So
yep.
Take your pick. What do you want to talk about?
Well, we can talk about any number of things. I'll probably share to start some of the work we've done on shooting ranges in Maine, and so as you I'm sure know that a good deal of the PR dollars, I think upwards of 75% of the federal tax that we receive comes through the Pittman-Robertson Act, come from people that shoot and don't hunt. And so several years ago, probably close to 15 years ago now, we started focusing on upgrades to shooting ranges statewide. And initially we started with some small grants for local clubs, trying to give them, kind of bolster their abilities, revitalize them some, enhance safety at those ranges, and at the same time allow for public access to those ranges. So we did that for a number of years, and then we switched over to making some significant upgrades to two of our ranges here in Maine, one in the Augusta area, and then another down in southern Maine and at the Brownfield wildlife management area. And those ranges have just been phenomenal. And then their staff, we have, range safety officers there all the time. So there's people can get instruction, they can get help, they can get guidance. We offer courses there, and they've grown, I think, almost 10% a month, every month, since we've opened them. It's just been tremendous benefit. The Freiburg range just reopened, or the Brownfield range, like 2 months ago, maybe. And we just made major upgrades and enhancements to that range. And so looking forward to seeing what sort of use that gets. And that range, being in southern Maine, does draw people from New Hampshire and Massachusetts as well. So it will get, it'll get a lot of visitation, I'm sure. And then we use those ranges to sort of the launch for many of our, what we call our next step programs. So for people who are new, particularly to hunting or shooting, we offer introductory courses. And so maybe you've finished your hunter ed class, but you don't really feel comfortable setting up a tree stand. You want some help with how you're going to track a deer. How do you call in a turkey? All all those various things that once you have your hunter safety completed, but you might still not feel confident enough to go out on your own. And so the next step programs, we have, close to 75 a year, are designed to sort of provide some mentorship and guidance for folks that are new. Certainly unlike fishing, which is a pretty light lift to get people engaged, hunting does have a more significant lift to get people involved and committed and kind of participating in a reoccurring basis. So, we're really excited to be able to offer so many of those programs in conjunction with our state-owned ranges.
So Judy, just another related range question, because I always like to ask this when we talk about ranges, is Maine's if you look on the map, Maine's a very large and rural state, more so than a lot of people think. But I know, from personal experience, siting ranges, one of the most difficult things is dealing with the people that live around them. It's noise or safety concerns or whatever. And is that even in rural Kentucky, when I was there, we had, same problems. We had a hard time finding spots for ranges because the public didn't want to hear that noise in the background. And we've actually had a couple of recent guests that were from the suppressor industry, which, is undergoing some changes. It may soon be, available to anybody who, off the shelf, sort of, if it comes out of the NFA, National Firearms Act. But that seems to have the potential to be a real game changer on, you want to get your ranges near the people, but the people don't want to hear the shots. So the suppressor thing seems like a great fit there. I don't know if you're experiencing any of that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say there's not much we do that doesn't draw some feedback from the neighbors, whether it's a boat launch, a new wildlife management area, but certainly the shooting ranges do generate concern from the neighbors. And so one of the facilities in Augusta, one of the challenges we had was that there had been a couple situations where some shells had left the range. And so so that facility is actually a no blue sky range. So there's no way for any bullet to get off that range unless people are being completely derelict. And, with staff there, that doesn't really happen. And it also has tremendous sound baffling capabilities. So the noise that's coming off that range is significantly less. And in fact, when we opened the range, the neighbors thought it was still under construction. They didn't realize it had been opened yet. And so that's what we like to tell people. Like, we're going to make improvements. There's people shooting here already. So we're going to make improvements. It's going to be safer. It's going to be quieter. It's going to be better for you as a neighbor. You're going to have a better experience. And, certainly, I personally think it's much better to have people come into a controlled environment, a safe environment with knowledgeable instructors. And, we've got all the safety berms, the lead remediation, and, the sound, baffling. It's much better than having people going to random fire pits, gravel pits, and shooting in the woods and, maybe not realizing how close they are to a dwelling or anything like that. So I think the ranges are a much, much safer, better approach. But for sure, the neighbors, until it's done and up and functioning, the neighbors generally don't want I think they often think that it's going to be louder once the improvements are done, and they have a hard time believing that it's going to actually be quieter, even if there's more people there, right? So they probably will get more use, but it's still going to be quieter because of the technology that we implement.
Yeah. I always use the nickel and dime argument too for the ones that still heard them. I said, every time you hear that pop, that's from a nickel to a dime going to conservation. So think about your clean water, clean air, healthy animals. Every time you hear that pop, 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 that's
right.
Just, it's like the bells on a slot machine,
Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you're focusing on target shooting. A lot of states are doing great jobs. Some states need to, pick up the pace. They can look at Maine and say, hey, this is what they're doing. We need to do something similar to reach out to those all the target shooters out there. But and then you've got that education classes where you can kind of cross over and teach a target shooter how to hunt or whatever it is. But I feel like I'm on hosting Jeopardy. So we talked about target shooting. Let's go to fishing for 500, Judy, and tell us a little bit about.
That's the problem with Maine. There's so many things there,
Well, and fishing, I know you got the whole coast and the saltwater, but you're focused on inshore. But you got rivers, lakes, streams, and you got hard water up there. Let's talk about ice fishing since that's around the corner.
Yeah, it'll be coming right up. Yeah, you can fish in Maine pretty much year round, depending on where you are in the state, but so it depends on the winter when we start having good solid ice, but usually by beginning of January, mid-January, even in southern Maine, you can get out on ice and fish safely on many of the small ponds. And then the larger lakes usually, in the northern part of the state, of course, they freeze up a little bit sooner. But yeah, there's opportunity statewide, virtually year round. It's amazing opportunity that folks have. We have a couple cool projects that we've started that you might all be interested in. And of course, one of the things we're challenged with is just kind of long-term management for species, right? And so brook trout being kind of the keystone species, Maine is infamous for our brook trout populations. And a few years ago now, I think 3 years, one of our regional biologists started a project where she implements or she inserts radio tag. So we're monitoring the brook trout and working with local guides and anglers, sort of catching trout, and then we anesthetize them and do a quick little surgery, insert a transmitter, and then monitoring the movements of those fish, both to look for where they're spawning, when they're spawning, and then during late summer, early fall, where are they going for thermal refuge to find the cold water? So we can use that information, one, for any enhancements or changes to management that we need, but also if we need to look at conservation or acquisition, to protect those thermal refuges that the brook trout particularly need. So it's been a super cool project, lots of interest, partly I think because we're using anglers and guides and volunteers to help us catch the fish. And then, people are catching the fish and they're like, oh, I just caught this fish, it's got a tag and, fin clipped. And so that's done, great work in elevating our understanding of movements. And, with climate changing, we do have some long-term concerns about the, cold water for species like brook trout. And so, I think we started that project. I think we're going to move that similar sort of protocol to another large lake out of in the Moosehead outside of Greenville area, and do a similar thing there and try and figure out where fish are spawning and what, if any, changes we need to make to management strategies there. So those are some pretty cool projects. We're also working on a project with Arctic char with the university. So Arctic char, also another kind of unique species to Maine, and similarly monitoring use and movement on those char. We only have 12 native populations. We're one of the only states, I think we are the only state in the country, in the lower 48 anyway, that has a native Arctic char population. So making sure that we have the knowledge that we need to manage them long-term and make sure that they're thriving as best they can. So they're kind of pretty sensitive to aquatic invasives. So we did a real big project with them, a reintroduction on one of our large waters, but that was probably 10 years ago now. But yeah, char are one of those bucket list species for folks, particularly in the fall when they turn those bright orange colors, those red orange, just such a beautiful fish.
I've got a new one on my list now because I had no idea you had Arctic char. Now I got to come. Yeah. I always said I got to go to Maine moose hunting because it's one of your iconic species. Now it's like I go to Maine moose hunting and catch an Arctic char.
Yeah. Well, we'd love to have you do both.
Yeah. Well, speaking of iconic species, I know you have your own to two other, more terrestrial-based, moose, which everybody thinks. I always think about moose in association with Maine, but black bears, and you have, I think you're telling us, one of the longest research projects ever, continuous research project ever on black bears.
2025 marked the 50th year of our black bear research and monitoring study, and so we will be having a little celebration coming up here. And we actually went through and interviewed the real early biologists that worked on the program. But it's an amazing project, and we've used that program to sort of obviously set our bag limits and season framework, all that sort of stuff, and then we've had some questions. So here in Maine, you can hunt bears with bait, with trap, via a trap, or with dogs. And so the department's been criticized for allowing bait, and that there's a presumption that artificial bait increases productivity or survival of black bears. And so we actually worked with 2 different universities, and it's amazing what they can do. Like, from the isotopes from hair, they can detect what that animal has eaten in the past 30 days or 90 days. And so, the universities, and it's not us doing it. So we like to, when we have issues like that, we like to work with another university and let their, PhD students work on these projects and do the analysis. So it doesn't look like we're kind of
Right.
skewing
Sort
or
of a
biasing.
separation of duties.
Yeah,
sort of
a
thing.
little separation there. And so, so we were really thrilled that it showed no correlation at all to bait having any impact on our population or survival, which we long believed, but it's really nice to have someone else document that. And, our bear biologists could argue all day long why that, of course, that is not the case. And you can see the number of young produced every year, and it correlates with natural foods, and bait's steady, and all those things. But, having that 50-year data set, we also collect teeth on harvested bears, so we're able to age the bear and monitor productivity and survival. It really is critical for being able to maintain those hunting methods that every, here in Maine, so many people don't really understand that our woods are dense, they're thick, right? So we've got a large black bear population, but most of them are in the parts of the state that people don't really live, that they're pretty unpopulated. Most of them are, like, we call them townships, T6, R2. They don't even have names. And, they're dense, heavily wooded. It's just not easy you just don't see a black bear. It's not something you just encounter in Maine. I think I've only seen a black bear in the wild twice, and I spend a lot of time out particularly in the North Woods. So, we use those tools to help us manage population, keep the population at healthy, socially acceptable levels, particularly on the southern part of their range where they do overlap with people. And so, we're really excited to celebrate 50 years of this amazing project. And so we're looking forward to that. There's a little video that will come out in the middle of November, I think. And we similarly just had another video produced, more of a documentary on our moose program, Guardians of the Giants. And that really kind of follows a few different interests. So photography, moose watching, and hunters, and the importance of moose, and just kind of the what moose mean to the people of the state of Maine. They mean a lot of different things, and it's interesting to watch the video and just see lots of people have the same reaction, whatever their background is. It's just a majestic animal. It's just awe-inspiring. And so we've been studying. This is the 5th year of our adaptive moose harvest, and I think we've had the research project, I think this is in its 14th year now, where we're collaring, putting large radio collars on moose, and then monitoring them and their survival throughout the year. And so now we're mostly just collaring the calves, or the young, or they're probably technically yearlings because it's in January, but and then monitoring whether they survive through the winter. So we have a winter tick issue that's probably not new to folks, but winter tick are the major cause of mortality for our moose here in Maine. And so monitoring the survival and movements, and the GPS collars that we put on the moose they give the moose biologist 2 locations a day. And then if the moose don't move, they give out a mortality signal, and then our staff go in, collect all the biological data, and do, my light just turned off, sorry. Moose mortality, they'll do a whole full necropsy when we work with the university on that as well, to do kind of all the blood work and analytics on that. So another really cool project that we're super proud of. All of it is paid for, through our federal Pittman Robertson funds, and really none of it will be possible without those funding sources.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you about your winter tick, your ghost moose syndrome. Are you seeing population level impacts with it? Is it that I mean, I know I've seen it when it does occur on one, and it can be devastating. Imagine trying to live your life in a cold winter like that, and somebody takes all your coat away.
Yep.
It can't be a lot of fun.
Yeah. It's crazy that a tick, something so small, can actually be the cause of mortality for such a large animal. And certainly it varies from year to year, but some years we have up to 70 to 90% mortality of the calves. But it's important to note that here in Maine, we don't really have many apex predators on moose. So unlike in the western states where they might have wolves or grizzly bears or even mountain lions, like we don't have those things here. So, it's got a shock value, right? That 80 to 90%, but still most wildlife populations, as we know, the young of the year don't have the greatest chance to survive that first year. So we don't see that same level of mortality in the adults. So once the moose makes it through its first year, they seem to do okay. Now what we're also questioning, or what the moose biologist is questioning, is it slowing down reproduction? So are the females having fewer young? Is it taking them longer to get big enough to have a calf? So those are all things that we're looking at. We still have a really large moose population here in Maine, and so we're still fortunate that we're still able to offer a very successful moose hunt annually, with limited, about 4,000 permits a year. So we haven't seen the level of impact where to date we regularly haven't had to decrease the permits, but we'll see. We did a 5-year study in our what we call our adaptive moose hunt in half of one of our management zones, and so in one half we issued additional cow permits only, an additional 550 permits, with the idea or the thought that if we can reduce the moose population in this area, will that kind of reduce the tick? So will the tick, just like your typical predator prey, if there's fewer moose, will the ticks drop off, and then will we see better productivity and survival? So we just finished year 5, so the biologists will be spending the next year analyzing all that data and monitoring kind of calves for this upcoming year to see if it had any impact and what we'll do next.
I think a lot of people don't think about that, but that comparison of predators, apex predators that you have in the West versus disease in the East. I mean, because when we restored elk to Kentucky, the meningoworm or brainworm was taking, 5 to 10% of the population every year. And it's like, well, but we don't have wolves, we don't have panthers, we don't have winter kill, we don't have lots of snow, and they don't migrate. So they eat good groceries 9 months a year versus, elk out west eating sticks and rocks. So it's like, it's sort of a wash, so just
there's going to be mortality, right?
Yeah, so exactly, there's going to be mortality, exactly. And that's the other thing I was going to say about moose is when you're describing them, I guess to other people, I think people when they see them the first time is you don't really, until you're up close to one, you don't realize it's one of the few animals that's bigger when you see it in person than it is when you see it on a picture.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
My wife saw a calf moose in Wyoming this year. We were elk hunting and a calf, and she said, that's a large moose. And I said, just a second. And then Mom stepped out. And she goes, I said, that was the calf you were looking at. There's the mama. Yeah. And she was huge.
Yeah. We had one. So my husband and I bird hunt quite a bit. And so we got 2 German short hairs, and we were bird hunting last week or the week before, I guess. And the dogs must have, flushed a cow, and she got up and she was pretty bristly, and my husband, who's pretty avid outdoorsman, was like, I almost started climbing the tree. He was like, he was not happy. They're a big animal.
They're huge.
She just ran off, but up close and personal like that, I mean, they're bigger than a horse.
Yeah.
I
think people are expecting a large deer size animal.
Yeah,
but it's much, much larger than that. So
I mean, some of our moose weigh over 1,000 pounds.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty big animal.
Well, I love hearing about the science of wildlife conservation, because there's, folks listening that might think, oh, just let animals take care of themselves. But when you have 330 million humans walking around, you can't let animals, even
Right.
how sparse humans
No.
are, maybe in northern Maine, you have to manage wildlife populations through science. And again, that science is funding those biologists coming from excise taxes and hunting license. So appreciate that. And we got to talk about fishing and hunting and target shooting. Let's talk a little bit about trapping and the opportunities in Maine and the management tools and all
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a pretty active trapping program here in Maine, and we have probably more interest in trapping now than we've had, for the past 20 years or so. And we just worked with Responsive Management, is maybe 3 years ago now, but when we updated our fur bearer management plan and did a statewide survey of kind of the level of support for trapping, and it was remarkably high. I think, in fact, among the highest in the country. So people in Maine are relatively supportive. And, I like to remind folks that trapping is regulated. It is strictly regulated. And, it's an amazing opportunity. You have to be really knowledgeable about the outdoors and about wildlife to be successful at trapping. But interestingly, one of the things, it's not as, other than, when we tag fur, there's a lot of fur bearers, right? And there's a lot of species to manage. And so one of the things we did, or we are moving toward, is camera traps to help us monitor fur bearer populations. And so much of Maine is vast wilderness, 17 million acres of woods. It's very cost effective to send staff out to kind of monitor hands-on many of these wildlife populations. So several years ago, we worked with the university and a PhD student to set up camera traps, and they're baited, and using those traps to monitor fur bearer populations. And it turns out that's a really effective way to do that. So it's much less, human time. And you can go out, check the traps periodically 3 or 4 times, or however, until the batteries need to be replaced. But it's a much more efficient way to get a large amount of data. And I was actually just in a meeting with my counterpart in Nova Scotia, and he was talking about, well, we were looking at doing this. I'm like, hey, we have a PhD. We got a whole dissertation on how effective this is. We can share it. It was very similar habitat here. So let's let you guys take this. And it's great when we can share those kinds of knowledge bases and use an effective tool. Like everybody has game cameras now. So how are we going to continue to use technology to help us in the conservation world? And, money's tight for everybody. So it's an effective way to monitor populations, minimize expense, and still relying on good science to make those management decisions.
Are you seeing for your trappers there? Because I trap in Kentucky. I've used to trap in Georgia, but there's much of that is recreational because we don't get the fur quality that the northern states do. So I'm assuming you still got there is still a fur market. It's depressed, but there's still a fur market. I'm assuming you got a fair number of trappers. They're actual commercial trappers.
There are still some trappers. It's still what we call long line. That they run a lot of traps, and they are more commercial. But certainly the pelt market has is gone down, and so a lot of folks are doing it even for animal damage control to help with their neighbors and water flow issues, particularly with beaver and stuff like that. But we see increased people and surprisingly a lot more women getting into trapping than historically than we've seen. And so that's really encouraging for me. And I think it's an amazing way to get outside. It's a different way to get outside, and kind of the rules around trapping and just how you have to conduct yourself. And it's so different than anything else we do.
Well, and you started off by saying you have to be really, really skilled, and you're right. I always think trappers are the best naturalists in the woods because they're really trying to make an animal that probably doesn't want to come to that particular place put their foot in a 2-inch circle, and that's a next level or next order level of difficulty.
Yeah.
So
even with
if you can do that, you can probably get a deer.
Right. Well, even like we say, I was out with the black bear biologist when he was we trap in the spring to kind of what I say, recruit volunteers to our bear management program. And like he said, I've got to get that bear in all these woods to put her foot exactly right here, in any given time. And it requires a tremendous amount of skill and planning, and dedication. We got a 24-hour mandatory check. You got to check that trap every single day, so, it's not for the faint of heart.
Right.
It's not for the
And,
casual outdoor person. Yeah.
I like that you made the differentiation between legal, regulated, and not, because I know your department works with I think it's the Operation Game Theft up there, because as a hunter and a outdoorsman, like, we hate poachers, right? And poachers are not hunters. It's totally different. So talk a little bit about the relationship you have with that Operation Game Theft. I know John and Boone and Crockett have the Poach and Pray project coming out, but
Yep.
important topic.
Yeah, so OGT, Operation Game Thief, is a nonprofit. It's the only nonprofit that we work with that is kind of entirely dedicated to helping the department. And whether that be raise money for gear that the department needs, or helping us when we just recently had an incident of an animal shot illegally. And so OGT can offer a reward for any information that folks have. And I am amazed at how often that people that do things they shouldn't, how often they talk about it, and then somebody else calls in and says, "Hey, I just got a report of this person and they did that." And so, it's an anonymous call in. Folks can call in anonymously. There's kind of a tip line, and very often, it's a family member or somebody that calls in because they're annoyed because they're whomever was doing something that they think is wrong, and they call in, and then the warden service gets dispatched to go investigate those cases. So it's a really great program, and they're a great partner with us. They also, of course, work with our Marine Resources Department as well. So yeah, it's a great group, and always kind of working on how can we do things better. And they've got now our staff have this app that they can go in, so they don't even have to log into their computer, and they get their reports on their phone. It's just really phenomenal.
All right, we got to talk about everything. We could hit I guess a grand slam.
We haven't talked about birds yet.
Oh, well, let's talk about birds before we go.
One really cool new project that I love for a few reasons. One, I love birds, and so we, a couple years ago, 2-3 years ago, I think we started a golden eagle camera trapping. And so for years we would get reports of golden eagles, and most of us, I hate to say, would be like, it's just a bald eagle, it's just a young bald eagle, it's not a golden eagle. And so the raptor biologist started a project where they put out bait and camera traps, same sort of thing, and capture pictures and turns out there's a lot of golden eagles in the state in places we did not know. We have like beautiful photographs of golden eagles all over the state. And so all of those times I was telling people like, it's just a young bald eagle. Got lots of bald eagles. What was the habitat? No, it was not a golden eagle. It turns out there's lots of golden eagles coming, just in the winter really. But so last year we were successful in actually capturing and trapping and banding 2 of them. So this year we're going to expand that project and try and get some more cameras set up in southern Maine as well. So we can sort of get a better handle on where eagles are, where they're moving to, and how often they've been seen. But they're pretty awesome birds, so it's pretty cool to have
another one of those animals that's bigger than you thought it was when you see it in person. They're you put them next to a bald eagle, like, there's no question.
Yeah. I love projects that engage the public, and the people are so excited about this project. We just finished our breeding bird atlas, the same thing, documented for 5 years. So we got all the ranges for all the birds in the state of Maine, and we used thousands and thousands of volunteers, and amazing to be able to get people engaged, interested, and excited in the things that the department works on and manages. So I love projects that kind of engage the public as well.
Well, definitely thank you for, all that you do, your dedication to the outdoors, and, little tidbits of what we talked about today, but there's much, much more. So where can folks go to learn more about what's going on?
Maine Fish and Wildlife, mefishwildlife.com. Or you could also just Google Maine Fish and Wildlife or Maine.gov, Maine.gov, and you can scroll your way too. So we've got great website. We also have really good social media. So if you don't follow us on Facebook or Instagram, you can follow us there. Huge following, great outreach that we do. If you want more information, email you directly. You can go onto our website and opt in to get almost updates on hunting, fishing, trapping, birding, ice safety, whatever your interest is, you can click on, and as we send out updates, we'll email you those updates. We also have a new app, Maine Outdoors, I think, and that will keep track of, if you're here in Maine or if you come to Maine to hunt or fish, you can keep all your permissions there, your family's permissions there. You can get updates on all the laws, regulatory changes. You can get all the stocking information. So if you want to go fish in Maine after they just stocked, you can find out when they stocked and how many fish they stocked and what species. So really great app. So encourage folks to check those things out as well.
Yeah. Well, Judy, once again, I echo Jim's thoughts. Thanks for coming on. Not that we had any barriers to come into Maine to enjoy the outdoors, but you've broken down every barrier there could possibly be, from the app that tells you everything to Arctic Char. Who knew there were Arctic Char there? So now I have yet another reason. Have another reason to come visit you now. So, but thanks for coming on and spending some time talking about all the wonderful things Maine's got.
Yeah, and, thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So to our listeners, thanks for listening. You heard all the wonderful things Judy said about Maine. Go visit. Sounds like it's a sportsman's paradise and birdwatcher's paradise. And pretty much, I can tell you, there's things you can do in Maine you can't do anywhere else, like finish the Appalachian Trail on the northern end. So there's a lot of things about Maine that are yet to be discovered for most people. So thanks for listening. If you like this episode, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe if you would. That'll help us. It'll also get you notifications when our next episodes drop. Other than that, we'll see you in the woods or on the water. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Connecting with Conservation podcast. Please do us a favor and tell your buddies, friends, family, and others about what you've learned here today. If you like what you heard, come on back anytime and listen to another episode of the Connecting with Conservation podcast.